6:03. I will call the meeting of the Campus Reconfiguration Committee to order. Ask the roll call to meeting, please.
Harrow. Manning.
Here.
Glassburner. Here. Turk.
Here.
Frank.
Here.
And Williamson.
Here.
We have 5 quorums here.
And are we in compliance with the open meetings law?
Yes.
Very good, thank you. Before us, we have a 13-point agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda? Motion by Frank, second by Manning to approve our agenda. All those in favor say aye. Aye. We should have minutes from our last meeting, which was way back on November 20th. Anybody have any corrections, questions on those minutes that were in your packet? Not, the chair will declare those minutes to be approved as presented. Item 6 on our agenda, public comment. We have folks here who wish to address the committee. Okay, we start with Tom. And Tom, if you'd introduce yourself and tell us what township you live in, and then you can go ahead with your comment.
Great. I'm Tom Crofton. I live in Rockridge Township. I was on the county board for a few terms, so I know a little bit about how this all works. Having witnessed Phoenix meeting there a while back, collaboration, whatever you call it, it became clear to me that there wasn't a vision of what to do with the court, with the campus. And the reality is, you guys have been working real hard, but there's not an end goal except dealing with the problem. A long time ago, about 15 years ago, I was coming up with an idea of how we could come up with different revenue streams besides the normal one. And one of them is thinking about alternative energy. If we use local resources instead of importing energy, we'd save a lot of money and be able to put that money back in the community instead of sending it out of the community. And to study that and all the other kind of ideas I think people could have, I'm suggesting we consider on a volunteer free basis, create Richland Community College that would study all the different ideas that people have and all the different things that school could be as an institution, not to mention as a site for other activities, and be a different place to create a vision of what the community could make out of this situation. And to do that, we really need another longer meeting with all kinds of possibilities in a different forum. And I would request that the, say, Tippin Hall on the campus would be available once a month or something for a while till we see if there's an interest in doing this. I have talked to a lot of the folks who were involved in the campus before, and there's a lot of interest. People are liking the ideas. People are also getting old. There's a lot of bad health. You have a lot of issues. So we have to really be talking about recruiting the interest of all kinds of people in all different parts of the community to make this work. And ultimately, I think we could double our economy and pay for all the improvements we need, not just on the campus, but throughout the community, if we got our economy kicking into gear. And so I think thinking of a sustainable ag and some of the forestry things and some of the energy things we could be doing, there's a way of creating an economy that we don't have right now. So I'm going to ask this group sooner or later to see if they would let us have a meeting space there for another month or two, once a month, until we see if it's even real. That would be a request.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else that wishes to comment?
There's nobody else, let them go first, because I got some.
Okay.
My name is Alan, if you don't know me. I'm here tonight to request that Simons be allowed to start using the gymnasium out at the campus. Simons is another county entity. You know, it's not an outside organization to the county, and frankly, we're running out of room on Simons for membership. At Simons in the last 6 months has grown by about 500 people. And, you know, I believe the increase in that membership is due to both the efforts by Mike Hardy and Kyle Ewing, you know, with everything they're doing, running the operation out there, and the Simons Foundation, and your model aware, is donated about $50,000 worth of exercise equipment and other furnishings and other items to Simons 2024. And at our last meeting, we approved, the foundation approved donating another $21,000 toward more exercise equipment. And I've got a video, if anyone wants to see it, of that people planned exercise room about a week and a half ago. I was out there for a class, and there was 18 people in there, and I heard there was a couple people that left because there wasn't room for people to be in there. So, you know, the Simons And the Simons Foundation heard the message that the county board sent, to try and make Simons sustainable so it can be standing on its own 2 feet. And I think we're there, as Mike Hardy reported at the last natatorium board meeting. I think, for January on the, sort of like for last year, Simons turned a small profit, and so far this year, in the month of January, we're revenues ahead of expenses. And that's before the county and the city and their portions of the money that they've typically gotten. And so, we're doing everything we can, but running out of room. The gym is sitting there empty. It's right across the way. We're another county organization. We'd like to have access to it so we can continue to grow and add more members and improve. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'd like to see the video. When is it available somewhere?
I can email it to you. All right.
Mr. Lowe.
Thank you, Dave. Some of you don't know me. I'm Richard Lowe. I used to be the owner of Lowe Manufacturing before everybody got wise and told me to sell and move out or whatever. Bob and Randy know me, unfortunately. But I'm here to talk about something maybe a little different. Got a big face in that camera there. All those pianos that are out at the campus. And I've had pianos since before I remember being alive. And one that strikes me that I was able to actually see and play in spite of somebody saying nobody was allowed. That was back in March of 23. There's a Baldwin piano out there, 7-foot full concert grade piano, built in 1970. Best I can figure when it was still in Ohio. Baldwin at the time was considered a direct competitor to Steinway, the world's most famous piano brand. But the piano's in not the shape it should be, because the worst thing you can do to pianos is neglect them and just store them and never use them and not control the climate and all sorts of other bad things to wood-based instruments. And they're extremely complex in their mechanisms and whatnot. There's 10, 12,000 parts in a normal piano. So you can imagine, but the ivory keys, which are no longer lawful, are horrible. It's very dirty. But yet when I played it a little bit, the sound quality was, this was March of 23, the sound quality was actually pretty good. I don't think there's a cracked soundboard, which would be a death sentence to a piano. The key action seemed pretty good, except for the cruddy keys. I've talked to Farley's House of Pianos in Madison, which, by the way, is where I bought my rebuilt Steinway from. So I've been in their workshop and actually seen all the details of how all this stuff is done. So as that is a background, plus you have all sorts of other pianos, I guess, too. Looking at the Richland Center High School pianos, being honest about it, they're not in very good shape. I can say it less politely than that, but I'll say it as politely as I can say they're not in very good shape. The Baldwin piano, especially that I'm talking about, it would be a shame to give that away or give it to the lowest bidder, because right now it is in a stage where it needs some sort of rework or rebuild. I'm willing to look into that on my own volition, and maybe with me and some other people, we could help resuscitate that. But why not give that piano to the high school? Have it there for special events, Lyceum programs for the students, other piano players that may come in and give little concerts and whatnot, expose a little bit different part of the culture of the rest of the world. You know, my wife and I saw a piano concert last Saturday from a 26-year-old pianist from Indonesia down at Farley's, who went to Juilliard School in New York and all this and that. And it was just amazing. And I'm thinking, you know, we don't have anything of a resource where we could bring people like that to our area. So what I'd like to do is get permission from you folks to look at those pianos with my knowledge of pianos. Plus, I also have connections with my piano tuner who was raised at the knee of his father, who tuned pianos for Chicago concert people.
You have 3 minutes. 3 minutes are up. I'm sorry. Appreciate what you're bringing to us. Leave us some contact info. We don't act on any public comment during the meeting.
But quickly, I'd like to have permission that Randy can let me in to look at these pianos and get an idea.
That's not something we can decide right now, but if he's got your contact info, then we know how to get hold of him. So.
Is that okay, Randy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, but they would have to approve it.
Right, yeah,
Yes.
right. Like I said, we're not deciding that tonight, but we'll have your
And
contact.
it's all for community benefit.
Thank you very much. Anybody else with public comment, either here in person or online?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
do these have issues hearing this or
Okay.
us bring other folks and
Okay.
He's not muted, so I can see, there he is.
We see you, Steve.
Maybe he could try calling it.
Yeah.
With the sound to speech, that way he could at least hear.
Yeah.
Or sound work.
All right, well, we'll try to get Mr. Carroll connected so he can actually hear us and we can hear him. And while we do that, we will move on to the agenda to item number 7, which is reports. Starting with Venture Architects, and Kyle has joined us online. Kyle, it's been a while since we talked. Welcome back.
Yes, it has been a while. Thank you very much for having us back, Mr. Chair. We're excited to be a part of the process again, and we appreciate a lot of the feedback during the public comments here. And I think there's if I can share my screen for part of this. I think one of the things I'm going to bring up the, let's see here, I have to make sure I click, share like 3 times here. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? I've got a modified agenda up. And Derek, this is no comment to the agenda you had put together here for the chair, but a couple of items that I just wanted to go through. So one of the things that we were hearing about just with the public comments, I think it's important to just state right off the bat is I just started diagramming during some of those comments that typically when we come in and work with a county for space needs and master planning, this would be how that process works. We come in, we begin our space needs analysis, we look at existing drawings, then we meet with departments, find out what their current size is, what are their needs in the future, how many full-time employees they might be needing to add, some might be reducing, and then from that we can begin some departmental programming needs, and that starts putting a square footage to both the head count and the space needs analysis, and from that we can begin creating this master plan. That will be the typical process for how we have been moving forward with Richland County and the very unique situation that Richland County is in. There's this component that I don't have a good diagram to go over this, but there's a component that overlays and is kind of woven in between all of these, and that component is the campus component of this, and we've had to somewhat reactively help provide information to this committee and then therefore to the board to make future plans for winterization of buildings. Do they all stay open? Do we shutter some down? And going through that, what space do we have? What space do we need for departments? All of that has been kind of different because we've got these sort of 2 to 3 different locations that we have to look at, and the campus is critical to look at that. So just hearing the public comments, I wanted to just state that the maybe what number 1 should be in my adjusted part of the Venture Architects update would be, hey, where's our master plan? That's a very fair question for everyone to be asking, especially this committee. And I think the response to that is a lot of things need to be decided as a result of what is happening with the campus and what the future of the campus is in order to really begin to galvanize what that master plan for Richland County will be. We want to be the county's partner throughout all of this and provide you the appropriate information so that both the committee and the board can make very informed decisions in the current state relative to having to be both reactive and proactive with decisions relative to the campus and as we heard just before, the Simon Center, but then also create a master plan that is very fitting for a board 20 years down the road. And this committee can set up that pathway for all future committees and boards to look at it, pick it up and just say, yeah, this makes sense. This is why we've got to trust the people who made these decisions and we're ready to move forward with that. So that's the high level just sort of piece I wanted to come back to with some of the items that we had heard earlier. So with that, I did have the fortunate opportunity to talk with both Board Chair Turk and also Derek Kalish, the clerk, on getting ready for this meeting. And they had mentioned, they had both mentioned that one of the key things we want to talk about, and it is an agenda item later here, is priorities for future use of campus buildings. So when we get to that, I think one of the things we would like to do is just come back at that with a different question as part of our report. And that is, what does the committee want to report out at next week's county board meeting? And I think if we can just level set right now what some of those key motivations are to report back and what are those needs, we can while we're presenting and reporting out, we can bring in those special pieces to really be able to provide you that information for that report out next week. So is one of the key pieces with that is having for next week's board meeting for this committee to be able to say, hey, this is what the committee has met with. We've shut down 2 of the buildings, and I can hopefully pull up the map here. Yep, here we go. We had both the classroom building, which is building B, and the library building, building C, and that leaves us with building A, which is the science building, building E, the Copper Top, the theater and student center building, building D, Melville Hall, and the administration building, and building F, the gymnasium. Is the intent of the committee to be able to come back to the board next week and have a plan for the remaining 4 buildings?
Not yet.
It would be nice, but.
Yeah.
Okay, and that
We're not ready to make that step yet.
that's good to know. That's very, very good to know, because then we understand how to tailor some of the information that we can provide for you. So to that point then, one of the other requests that was made by the county clerk and acting county administrator, Derek, was the ask of, hey, can we get an estimate on what the demolition costs would be? There is the state grant that is out there for counties with a UW campus that has been closed, and it will be very helpful for the county to understand, hey, if we're getting this $2 million grant, we don't even know how much it costs for the demolition of any building. So let's get that information in. So what you're seeing here.
If I can clarify, Kyle, that actually came from the committee too, not just Derek.
Okay.
And that's
that
a
came
piece
from
of
the committee.
information we wanted to consider. It's not saying that's what we're looking at doing, but we want that information.
Absolutely appreciate that comment, Chair. I just want to, I apologize for the miscommunication on that. But yes, we were charged to find out what that cost is. just for consideration purposes, because again, there's a whole lot of pieces that are here for consideration, and decisions can't be made without having all of the information. So the diagram that you see up currently, it was a diagram that we put together for our construction management partner who's helping us on the estimation side of it. So we made some notes to this, and what we had done was provide the piece with the square footage for both the classroom building and the library building, shown here in orange, as being identified as being shut down for overwinter. Then the buildings that have been left open are Building A, the Science Building, Building E, the Copper Top, Building D, Melville Hall, and Building F, the gymnasium. So then we had requested what the cost on these buildings would be for individual demolition of each building, just so there was that consideration. And then all of that would be summed up at the end. Another component that was asked was, of all of the site work that's here around the campus, just think of it as like, we'll call it the campus quad or square, all of the concrete flat work that's out there, the steps, the ramps, the railings, anything like that. There's quite a bit of site work that's out there. What would that cost be? So they've put a cost to that. And then we also asked them to put a cost for the parking lots. And this is recognizing that some of this would need accessibility. Oh boy, that was not expected. It would need accessibility to get to the Simon Center. But this is just a number. That piece for the accessibility can be determined at a later date. This is just a round number for consideration for the committee and the board. What we did not have them do is include any cost for any demolition of any bridge work, understanding that that is something that is also under work right now with one bridge and in consideration for another bridge. So with that, we were able to get those numbers from our partner. And would it be appropriate to go over those numbers right now?
Sure. And this is
Okay.
available to our committee members in your packet.
So with that, there's a lot of information that's embedded in here. Really, on page 2, on the lower part is really the I'll say the meat of the consideration, and that is that first part. I'll say phase 1, which was the demolition of Building B and Building C. They have, and I should say before I get into a lot of detail here, our partner who we worked with, I'll say the numbers that they put together here are very thorough. They were requesting a lot of information relative to the heights of the buildings, what are the penthouses like, how much equipment is up there, what's the accessibility up there, would a crane be needed? They really were asking some pretty detailed questions, not just throwing a number at the wall and hoping it would stick. So there's been a lot of thought and consideration put into these numbers. So I just wanted to validate these numbers with that. So for the demo of Building B and Building C, and I apologize that this is a wide element and probably very hard to read on the screen. I'll try to zoom out enough. For Building B, it would be around $214,000, and that's the classroom building. Building C, just due to the larger square footage, $326,000. So together, if both of those were to be demoed, that would be a cost of $541,005. So these individual breakout numbers that we have per, I'll say, work scope, have their own mobilization number buried, embedded in there. So that number reflects if a group came out to demo those 2 buildings. Okay. So then there is the other part here where what if the other say this were to happen at some date, and then maybe a year later, or 2 or 5 years later, the other 4 buildings, Building A, D, E, and F, were to be demoed. That cost, when it would be summed up, would be $2.1 million. Okay. That too has its own mobilization cost into it. So they're broken out into discrete little projects, if that is fair. Now, part of the demolition of building F, we did direct them that there would be the salvaging of the basketball court, the floor, and they put a cost of roughly $27,000 to that effort. And that would be going in and pulling the floor up and then storing it in a very safe and protected manner for that. So there would be a cost on top of that. Any questions with these numbers?
Questions? Mr. Manning, go ahead.
Now, on your demolition costs, is that simply for them to go down, or is that including crushing?
My understanding is that would leave the pad completely removed. They would have, because it's a slab on grade building, that would all be taken apart, and it would just be down to dirt at that point.
So they would haul away all the rubble too?
That is included as part of this, yes.
And how about the copper, steel, and like that? Do they retain that, or does the county?
Yes. Okay. So that's a great question, because I did have a conversation with them about that, and they said that the amount of effort that would be required for someone to just come in to salvage all of the copper may not, and this was for say the county hired a separate contractor to come in, remove all of that, and then go in and get that salvaged for a cost. The amount of effort for that would likely be a wash relative to the cost of all of the staging, all of the equipment for a contractor to go and take all of that. They said then what you could have is the demolition contractor, that could be on the demolition contractor to do. You could pose that to them. That could be an attractive idea for them to be able to salvage all of the copper, and that might be able to be realized in some level of credit back to the county. But from my understanding and how it was described to us, is that the effort, because it's on a number of separate buildings, all of those buildings have different heights, the amount of staging and equipment that would be needed to remove that in a manner that would be there, the cost benefit analysis there was neutral.
I would strongly disagree with them. I do demolition for a living, and I can easily take 10 off on a wooden roof, separate it enough where the salvage here takes it. I looked at these buildings as if I was going to do the demolition. The copper would actually come off very easily. I mean, you're not going to get all of it, but as you demo that, it separates. And my own thoughts is you could get a lot of copper and steel as you demo them buildings, and then put it in a separate pile. Are you talking with Robinson Brothers, is who you're discussing this with?
No, we went through the Samuels Group. They are a construction manager out of Wausau. Now, that being said, to your point, a specific salvage / demolition contractor may have a completely different opinion on this. Now, one of the things that we were told from the Samuels Group was for someone to come in, maybe yourself, and remove the roofing and the fascia, the gutters, the downspouts, anything like that, that would leave some area of exposed roofing. And that would be the only part. Is there any temporary coverage that would be needed over that, even though that would be eventually getting demoed? There was that piece of it where there were more questions that they were asking. But if you are saying that from a pure salvage standpoint, this is a very attractive offer, I would say that would be something that is certainly worth the consideration of this committee or by the county on the side.
So you really right now just have the one consideration, like I said, Robinsons have done a lot of demolition in our area here, thinking of the hospital, Pine Valley, Co-Tractor. They're the ones that usually do our bigger work here. So I'm just thinking I'd like to give them a shot at it too. I know we're not making any decision tonight, but I would like to see 2 bids on it.
Are there other questions for Kyle?
Okay, hearing none, we can just quickly go through the remaining items of this, and there were only 2 more. So the other one was the site demolition, and that was this area in green. So all of the campus quad walking area, we'll call that. So that number, so that's remove sidewalks, steps, planters, landscaping. That number is $227,000 for just cleaning up all of that that flat work. And then the parking lot number came in at $187,000. So when you put all of that together, we go to the 4th sheet. They have summed all of that up to be a total, because then the next thing I said is, okay, it would be very helpful for the county to have an understanding of, hey, what if everything was done at the same time? What would that number be? And that number is $3.4 million. And to that, if it was all done, that's the total of everything, okay? Now, they said if everything were to be done at the same time, you could probably take about 5% off of that, just because each of those individual discrete projects had a mobilization charge to it. So that number would go away with the total project.
Other committee members' comments, questions?
Henry, I'm wondering, just clarification.
Mr. Crofton has a question.
This is an estimate by a construction manager. It's not bids.
Right.
So, Gary, what you're saying is very valid. That these numbers are by people that don't do the work. They're people that organize the work sometimes.
Yes, correct.
So local people could do a completely different numbers and all that.
Right. We're a long way from even making a decision on any of this.
These are estimates by people that
And that's what we were looking for, was ballpark estimates. Just
Yep, and that it's a very valid point. This is just quantifying a cost to an idea that can then at least have a little bit of greater understanding for decision making. And if that decision making is with a grant or with funds, it's helpful to have what this number is.
Other questions or comments? Any? Okay, move on.
Okay, so with that, we can go to number 2, which is part of the little egg diagram down at the bottom of my modified agenda, and that is the master plan and the campus and how do they relate. And the piece with that is, and we can go back to that campus diagram, is if we take the space needs analysis that Venture has done, and we look at what the needs are in the future with a lot of departments, and this is something that we've talked about at previous campus reconfiguration committee meetings, and that is one of the things that is challenging for the county is having ownership of these buildings and having space needs with departments. The challenge there being is the buildings that you have on the campus after if we no longer consider the classroom building or the library building, for the most part, they are generally highly specialized buildings built for a very specific purpose. And those purposes that they were built for really are not in alignment with, if any, departments currently operating within the county. So for example, the science building, the number of labs in there, are there classrooms in there? Yes, those could be reconfigured, but there are some pretty specific lab related buildings in there. Same thing with the theater with the copper top. It really puts the decision-making process for the county into, I'll say, it's not binary in any means, but in kind of one of two camps. The county either wants to get into the business of having community theater and owning a building that maintains community theater, or the county is in the business of leasing a building out to a community theater group and maintaining the building for that group, and that is figured out through some kind of lease agreement. That same relationship could be said for Building F for the gymnasium. While the Simon Center is adjacent to it, there are some benefits to having synergies with the gymnasium and the Simon Center. Based off of the facility condition assessment, much of what is happening in Building F in the gymnasium, that building is really is at end of life for the equipment that's in there, for the infrastructure that's in there, infrastructure being wiring, piping, for any of the plumbing, and even quite a bit of the ductwork in that as well. The ductwork will be sufficient, but really it's the equipment that's in there that is needing replacement, and the building itself is in need of attention with roofing and some pretty significant tuck pointing around there. That being said, that basketball court floor is really a gem and is really part of the fabric of Richland County. So one of the things that I think we would likely recommend here with the gymnasium is, if there is any desire to reuse this building, it may be more cost effective to the county or a future owner to take the floor out, salvage the floor, demo the building, and build a new, more highly focused sports building that would be able to be much more effectively built and possibly tied to the Simon Center for the use and purpose that you need it to, as opposed to making the gymnasium building attempt to fit into a use that it may not have been designed for, if that makes sense. Any questions with that?
Okay, no questions here.
Okay, good. The last of those buildings is Melville Hall, D, the administration building. And that one probably out of the four blue buildings, we'll say here, has the most potential for reuse, because it really was administrative offices for both the campus and for professors. We can bring up we've kind of done a composite drawing here, because we've got the original drawing and then the 97 edition. So we just kind of pasted that on here to scale. So this is the part where, as you can see, we've kind of done some overlays here of what a typical office, if we were going to plan this from a business standpoint. Hey, we're going to put in offices, and those offices typically are roughly 150 square feet. That's what one of these little green boxes look like. And you can, we're just putting this in here for just a visual demonstration to show you how those spaces relate if we were going to try to make those fit in the current office space. Excuse me. So with that, as you can see, these offices that are currently there, the professor offices, are pretty small. They're about 900, a little like 950 square feet. So the point of this graphic exercise would be, if you were to move anybody out to Melville Hall, a decision would have to be made that anybody moving out there would either A, have to go into the existing office spaces that are there that would be small, or B, there would be a major renovation to get the office spaces up to current sort of I'll say industry standard size, which is roughly 150 square feet. Could you knock a wall out in between two of these offices and make it work? Absolutely. Square footage is square footage. It might be a little bit of a longer office space, but if it would make it work, it would not have to be a radical renovation. There could be we'll call it a Goldilocks option in between, somewhere in between the two of those. Now, that being said, the original building in Melville Hall has a significant number of ADA, Americans with Disability Act issues, and all of the many of the doors would need to be widened, and all of the hardware would need to go from knobs to levers. So there would be a significant cost that would have to be invested into this building, the original building, to get that up to a standard that is compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So this is certainly something from a master planning standpoint that our team can look at based off of direction from the committee that, hey, we're thinking of moving this department out there. And if that does not fill up the building, we can look at possibilities of, well, then could we have, say, half of this building be used for some county function, and then the other half, maybe the county could lease it out to a nonprofit, to another business. There's that potential as well. The one thing we would add in terms of a cautious awareness is these areas that we've indicated in red on this plan are areas that we've highlighted to be essentially no-fly zones. These are areas that are either mechanical spaces that have a roof access up to the roof, or in this case, it's a janitor's closet, but this is the water main is coming in to that room. And then I believe we have the electrical closet here, telephone equipment. Can those be moved? Absolutely. The cost of moving that tends to usually be cost prohibitive. So we've highlighted these as being kind of off limits. So any planning that would have to happen would have to work around those spaces. All other walls could be moved, could be adjusted. And then this area in the center of the building, currently it's showing it as a number of offices and some bathrooms. What happened is when the addition was put onto Melville Hall, these bathrooms were expanded to meet ADA requirements. They're still not fully in compliance, but that being said, from a spatial standpoint, they're compliant. They would need some minor modifications to just under sink components and things like that to get those to be up to current standards. So those bathrooms really take up this entire center area, and we would not really want to touch those if any redevelopment were to happen for Melville Hall. So of any of the buildings that really has the greatest potential for reuse, Melville Hall would be that building, and this is something that, as we had said earlier, with the direction of this committee and or the county board, we can really begin to look at, do some departments that are currently downtown work much better out here? Any questions with that?
Kyle, I know you mentioned when we first talked about this building that open space in the center of the older part of the building presents some challenges. Does it also present opportunities, or is it more challenge?
That's a very good question, Dave. It would probably be, I would probably put that into the opportunity range. If there was going to be the effort to do a pretty significant renovation of this space, the condition of that, of the, what are they calling? They're just calling it the open court. The condition of the open court is, there's a number of things. So first off, we'll address the big part of it, and that is anything that has to happen in here. Randy doesn't have a garage or a shed in the open court, so any work he has to do has to come through the building, through a door, and then into the court to fix it. That includes roofing issues, gutter issues, drain issues, all of which are currently in place around that open court. So there's a lot, what that means is there's a lot of physical building attention that needs to happen inside a court like this, a court space like this, and it requires a lot of maintenance and equipment that then has to come in through your building to have access to it. So if the desire of the county is to maintain that court, that certainly can be done, and that inside courtyard can be renovated to be much more, we won't say maintenance free, but less intense on the maintenance side of it, just due to some detailing issues. That being said, when we're going through this process of, we call it the paper doll exercise, where we cut out paper dolls and we put them around, when we move these shapes around and we look at how some of these things don't fit, if you were to get rid of that open court, now there might be that opportunity that you had talked about, Dave, where now all of a sudden there could be some greater chance that some spaces, if you were to roof over that court and turn that into, pour a slab in there and actually turn that into usable, leasable space, yes, that then becomes a little bit of it becomes a significant game changer relative to the considerations for this building.
Other folks have questions. Mr. Lowe has a question.
I built a factory 2 decades ago. I don't like the idea of closed off walls. Open the whole blasted thing up. There's modular partitions. If you need certain offices for privacy, okay, but don't get into all these little cubicle walls and whatnot. Your productivity, your air quality, so many things are much better if you keep it broad and open. And I think you could work that concept a lot easier and a lot less money than have an individual 10 by 15 rooms or whatever.
No, and
that's my experience, and it turned out to be one of the smartest things I did.
Currently, everything is partitioned, unfortunately, and I don't, Kyle, would there be viability to just open things up as opposed
Absolutely. Yes, and that's a great point that he brings up, that you could have this, we'll just use this sort of the northern area here as an example. Let's just say you want to move in a department in here. If you got, and I'll highlight this so it's a little bit more legible if in any way. So this blue area here, you could knock out all of those walls, put in some cubicles, and from a mechanical standpoint, yes, it now becomes a whole lot easier, because I would have to go back and we don't have our engineering team on the call today, but I believe a number of these rooms are served by the same thermostat, and it's just like a constant volume system that's running through here. So what would be very beneficial is actually eliminating some of these walls, and actually it would likely take a lot of that load off of the mechanical system that would be used for this. So when you start looking at it in this fashion now, and I'll just move a couple of these office spaces off of here, and just to clarify, these office shapes that we're showing is not that we're proposing that this be turned into office space. It's just showing what a typical office today would look like compared to what is in that building and some of the restrictions if that was the direction. But if you were thinking of going into a direction where you would be looking at open office space, those are pretty fair size spaces. And actually, let me actually give you a square footage of what that would be if we go through that. I mean, 800 square feet, that almost 900 square feet for this blue square here, that, you know, that could very well fit a department. And then with a furniture type solution, you could really create that area to almost be like a suite for a group of workers in one department. And then to that point too, we have to talk about the fiscal side of that. You cannot, well, when you have all of that as furniture, that certainly is more beneficial to the county rather than those being walls, just from an equipment standpoint and the ownership of that relative to amortizing the cost of the furniture. So that is a fair option that could be considered.
Yes, Randy.
Kyle,
Yeah.
if you had to, you could partition off and make an office for like a supervisor of that department within that.
You could.
Okay. So they had their privacy and if they needed it.
You certainly could.
Depends on the departments you have out there, because everyone
Right.
might need it.
Not everybody's gonna fit, I understand.
That's not a decision we're doing tonight.
No, just looking at possibilities. Mr. Lowe, go ahead.
When you're wide open like that, flexibility, a lot more options, how you want to get it. If that doesn't quite work, it's a lot easier to reshift things around. Build a fixed wall, you're locked in.
Yep. Good point. There is more ease in reconfiguration if you're dealing with an open space. Any other questions from the committee or members? Go ahead.
Could we go back to the gym for a second? If I recall the analysis that was done, it was about 1.9 million or call it 2 million to repair the gym. And I'm guessing a new gym would be about 10 million. How is it in the county's best interest? I mean, I'm just puzzled by this. How is it in the county's best interest to, you know, salvage the floor, tear down the building, and then spend $10 million when, you know, the report was that we could spend $2 million to fix up the existing?
No, that's a very fair question, and I am pulling that up right now, I believe. Yes, here we are. So this was the piece, we can talk about this. So yes, we had a building replacement cost at $9.7 million. The renovation cost was $3.22 million. And your question is extremely fair. So the part that we are in what I had mentioned earlier that did not have the additional level of definition to is this building replacement cost of $9.7 million would be if you rebuilt or if you built a new gym that was concrete block, brick, steel, like major steel structure as it has in there currently, not copper roof, standing seam metal roof, and build it exactly how it looks today, but build it today in those same materials. That cost would be the 9.7. We feel that if the desire would be to build a new gym facility, one could be built cheaper, lower cost than 9.7 million if it was built as more of a steel structure, steel building, a more lower cost solution. I'm thinking of sports performance facilities that have been going up in a lot of places. They're not pre-manufactured, but pre-engineered buildings would be probably the best general term to use for that. Would Would it match the Simon Center? No, unfortunately it wouldn't, but it would be a cost-effective solution to be able to get a gymnasium function in a structure, and you could build that structure and design that structure to be more fitting to the needs that you would want within that space. So whether it be a weight training facility, or it could be, you know, more yoga spaces, or whatever it would be, you could design that in there, in that footprint of a pre-manufactured, pre-engineered metal structure, far better than you could, and at a far lower cost than you could if you tried to rebuild that with brick and mortar. That's the differentiation there.
And I'm guessing if we were renovating versus building new, if we built new locker rooms, they would look different than what's in there right now and such like that.
Correct. There's a lot of tile that they used in that locker room in the day that was built, and if you go through any, even probably the high school right now, if you went through there, because that's a fairly new renovation there. That's, yeah, it's a far lot less of the level of material and labor to build those materials. So that's the differentiation there, that it would be you would still have the functionality that you would need, that the current gym would have, but it could be done at a more cost-effective manner.
And can you kind of contrast those other two numbers there, the deferred maintenance number versus the renovation cost, and what the difference is between the two and what they would encompass?
Yes, absolutely. So deferred maintenance cost here, really, that is when we went through and looked at everything and took care of the major items that need to be addressed, just to get the building to a level of all of the deferred maintenance that has not been performed on that building. That's the $1.89 million. The building renovation cost, that's the cost to get that building to an inhabitable open space. So what we don't have a cost associated with in this deferred maintenance cost is things like ADA upgrades in those bathrooms that are in there. So, or a lot of the railings that are there. This $3.2 million would be, that is the cost for consideration to have that be a public gymnasium that meets current code.
Do either of those numbers include addressing those end-of-life systems that you mentioned?
Yes.
Be like the roof and the HVAC and such.
Yes, those numbers are actually included in the 1.89 million. That's those items would be part of the deferred maintenance cost, and then a lot of the major part of the tuck pointing on the building, the ADA upgrades, I'm trying to think of a number of the other items that we had in there that would then take that beyond the deferred maintenance. The majority of it was physical design changes that would have to be made to make the building fully inhabitable, was in that 3.2 million.
Other gym questions?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay. So stuff to share with us, Kyle.
We can go into the space needs and the master plan relative to target locations. If you feel like what you have currently with what we've reported tonight is what you were looking for a report out to the board, then we can be good. We can begin to dive in to some of the space needs components of that, or even talk about the master plan and target locations. We can do that as well.
And I think that's what we're looking to bring to our board is, okay, we've gotten more in-depth information on the campus property. We need to consider what is our purpose for that property? What is our priority going to be? And then having the space needs conversation and clarifying with the full board, and this is later on our agenda, that the full board indeed wants this committee to continue on that route into the discussion of space needs. It does overlap with the campus, as we've been having some conversation here, but there are other elements to it that are not part of the campus. And we are the campus reconfiguration committee. So just want to clarify with the full board that yes, the full board does want this created committee to deal with those issues and not have some other method to do it. So.
Got it. So what we can, let's see, I have a couple of these items here that I can bring up relative to the space needs analysis that we had done. And a lot of this is working with each of the departments and the programming with that. And from that standpoint, what we can say is there are certain departments that, and this is just from a high level standpoint, there are certain departments that have greater space needs in the future than other departments. So one of the things we've got pulled up here is what we've got identified as county services and administration. So this is the clerk, zoning, county administrator, treasurer. We have existing square footages in here. We have recommended square footages that are in here. And then we also add a grossing factor to that. The grossing factor is, think of the grossing factor as the thickness of walls, stairwells. We don't really have a spot to figure out stairwells or items like that, corridors. That's all part of this grossing factor. So we take the department square footage, add the building grossing factor, and we get to our total building grossing square foot. So for things like this, currently county services administration, if you look at the blue box here, currently there's 12,800 square feet. We are proposing what is needed based off of interviews that would be that they really need 17,000 square feet. So this is just setting the baseline for this. We can look at Health and Human Services. They're currently at 25,000 square feet. Now, the odd part of this is we're coming back and saying, actually, because of the space that they're in is somewhat inefficient, that the number to right size that could really be better served at 23,000 square feet. So here we've had a reduction from the space that they have. Now, that being said, we go to the jail and the sheriff. And I'm sure most people are aware that the jail is 79, 80 vintage, and a lot of things in the way jails are expected to be designed today have changed. So here we can see a pretty major change. Currently, the jail is roughly 12,000 square feet. And for the jail and all support spaces, that really needs to be more around an 81,000 square foot number. Very big change there. Very big change with that. Then the other last group that we met with was the judicial, we'll call it the judiciary. So it is the courts, the judicial suite, district attorney, clerk, child support, register, and probate. And with that, we have, they're roughly around 10,000 square feet. And to be up to the standards today, that should be around 23,000 square feet. So the big takeaway with all of this from just a really high level standpoint, if I were to talk about a space needs, is the biggest need that the county has right now from a square footage standpoint is for the jail and the sheriff's office. And then the next one in line would be for the judiciary. But then there's probably, if you look at the jail coming out of the, 81,000 square feet, if there's already 12,000 square feet, and I think I have, nope, not that. There should be a diagram that I've got, not that one. Where is it? So sorry. Here we go. Let's go back here. So here's the floor plan for the existing courthouse, jail, original sheriff's office, and jail building. If you can see it, it's kind of old blueprint. little hard to read. But 11,000 square feet here is, I mean, it's maybe 1-2 floors of not, it's 1 floor of that building. This is not even 80,000 square feet. This is what we have for about 100-bed jail facility. If we were to do a jail pod, this is roughly the footprint that space would have in relation to that. I mean, it's almost twice as big, the footprint of that. Now, that's also a multi-level pod. This doesn't include any of the support space that goes with it. So it's not that 81,000 square feet. This would just be a housing pod. So you can see how that space is fairly significant in relation to the size of the existing jail. So with that being said, there's really some pretty limited options relative to where any kind of new jail could go. There was a plan that is out there where I forgot when it was, but the county had hired a consultant to look at expanding the jail and putting a new jail pod in the parking lot, much like this is showing here. And that is an option. The only issue with that is it's very limiting because there still needs to be the connection to courts. So it would need to have some additional consideration relative to potentially expanding to the south, across or into the street, across the street, if that wanted to stay downtown on the current site. Now, 81,000 square feet, when that is then considered out on the campus site, that there's a little bit more opportunity there. But in a conversation with the chair, that seems to be a non-starter of a conversation. Is that a fair statement?
Based on feedback we've gotten from the city, it would require a zoning change to that, and they would not be willing to do that because they don't want a jail there.
Okay. And that is fair because
Yeah.
Why would it need to be a zoning?
that's a fair statement, because as part of this campus reconfiguration committee's consideration, that statement and that opinion of the city from the zoning standpoint really changes a lot of the direction of county-wide master planning and the options available for that. So when we go through the review of the needs, the space needs that the county has, and identifying that really the jail and the sheriff has the biggest growth, the biggest needs of space, that then becomes the critical deciding component as to, well, then where does that need to happen? So, and if that can't happen out at the campus site, then as part of what informs our master plan, that will say that 20-year master plan for Richland County, that really informs what that report will look like.
Kyle, you and I had a conversation about, the scope of the plan and how long a period of plan we're talking to be able to accomplish what we need within the borrowing and spending capacity restraints that
Yes.
have Richland County. Can you just kind of share a little bit about what you and I talked about in that regard?
Absolutely. So, and I appreciate you bringing that up, Dave. So one of the things that we would like to share with the committee, and we hope can be shared with the county board, is one of the items as we're going through many of the interview processes, and really it was that those conversations that happened in between our departmental interviews when we were working with Candace at the time. One of the pieces that she really reiterated to our team was Richland County is extremely limited on both its borrowing capacity and the ability to and from an operational budget. So any of these options, as we start talking about these massive projects of an 81,000 square foot jail and sheriff's office, that we as a team recognize that is a major number and a major construction cost number for Richland County. And what a project like that can do to the borrowing capacity and to the tax base and the constituency of Richland County. So in the end, when this is sort of like the predictive, what our master plan will look like, we will have a master plan that will begin at the end, and that'll be, what is the end goal for Richland County? What does that need to look like? Where does that need to happen? And that's part of this process we're working through now, relative to, can that happen out at the UW campus? Is there another location that can happen? Can that happen downtown at that campus? And what are the options for that? And then that plan will have all of the items that come out of that space needs analysis to give Richland County what you should look like from a growth standpoint in 20 years. Okay. Now, recognizing that is a massive cost, that project is massive. We've already begun looking at, how do we get Richland County to that 20-year target? And how do we incrementally get to that? So we're working through that process of master planning, where there might be a 5-year goal and then a follow-up with a 7-year or 10-year goal, to maybe that 5-year goal looks at just replacing the jail. And then maybe that 10-year goal is then, maybe, or I should go, 5-year goal could be replacing the jail and updating the courtroom and some of the court security issues that are there. But the courts stay in the existing historic courthouse. And that 10-year goal might start looking a little bit more like, does that include the sheriff's office then with the jail? Or is that including then bringing the courts over to the jail? Because really the jail and the courts should be together for from the security purpose of having anybody in custody of the sheriff's office being able to have a secure path from the jail directly to the courtroom. Those two, and that avoids any kind of transportation cost or anything. And that is the safest way for both, for the person in custody, for jail staff and correctional officers, and really for the community. Because anytime there's transport, that's the highest point of risk for any type of inmate escape. So how can we combine the two of those, and how can we stretch that out over a course of time? And then maybe that 20-year, that 15 or 20-year goal could be then, once the jail is out of the existing building, and maybe the sheriff's office is out of that, maybe then at that point a radical renovation can happen of that existing building, that then those occupants that are there can come, they can go to a swing space wherever that might be, and then that renovation can happen in that building. And then those occupants can come back in. All systems are replaced, mechanical systems, window systems, brick tuck pointing, and the 1980 building is still operational for the county for another 20 years from that point on. So we're really cognizant of really incrementally building out this master plan. But in order to get to that point, we need to have that blue sky idea of that large project that would literally choke a horse, for the lack of a better statement there. So we kind of build it up all the way, and then bring it back down and incrementally get to what that blue sky goal would be.
And just to give folks an idea of what realities we're dealing with from our recently given to us 2023 audit, our debt limit is $90,400 and some odd dollars, and that's set by the state. That's how much we're presently, as of 12/31/23, using 31% of that capacity, or just over $28 million of it. So that's our borrowing constraint we're looking at. And even though we have that much capacity, it's generally not recommended you go all the way to your limit. Just as it's not recommended you go all the way to your credit card limit as an individual, so.
And Dave, what was that number again? I'm sorry.
Our total limit is 90,442, 90,442,000, sorry. And it's present, and that's as of December 31st, 23. And presently using 28,090,000 of it.
Okay.
Which gets paid off still quite a ways away.
The two largest items on there are the radio tower project, which we just started borrowing for, and the Pine Valley debt.
And that's got 10 years left? or something?
Pine Valley is
Around 2036.
37.
Yeah, 36, 37.
So about 10, 12 years yet.
Okay. Good. Very good information to know with that.
And when you talk about that long projection and taking steps, those are the kinds of elements that we need to work around and pieces we need to fit together. So.
Yes, yes. And with that, when we get to the location of knowing, okay, is this something that, you know, what could potentially be developed out here, if anything? Does the county want to develop out here? I mean, that I think is a fair question that should be asked. And then the same thing can go for a downtown site. What, if anything, should be developed down here? And I think those are all very fair questions. Once we as a team can lock in on where those locations are best suited for Richland County, then we can begin having a more what we will say right-sized plan for what those buildings would be. Because when we start looking at a lot of these numbers here, we'll go back to the jail, and just because it's the big number, we'll look at that 81,000 square feet. And if we know what that location is, we can get into that level of understanding relative to its specific location and right size what that number really needs to be. And then that can then inform what that cost would be to then start looking at, okay, if we were to do a jail, we're looking at roughly X amount for that. How and when would that be? We can inform the committee when that will be, and then that can be overlaid with when these borrowings, current borrowings, would be coming off of the rolls for the county, and how that would fit in relative to the levy rate. Or to the mill rate for that.
Can you go back to the blueprint you had of the campus, please?
This one.
Yeah, that's fine. So that is the campus grounds, the educational. There's more property there than that, correct?
Correct. Oh, yes. Yes. It goes way up the hill and
30 odd acres. So is your assessment, or is your contract with us to look at just what you have squared in there, or the entire 130 odd acres to come up with thoughts and plans, because that's a lot of extra area than just this little blueprint we see here?
Yes, it's a very fair point. We have limited a lot of our, I'll say our test fits to the area at the bottom of the hill here, just due to the level, and you can really see, and I think everyone is aware of the steep grade that happens really right outside the back door of the Simon Center, and behind the education building, the library. And then there's sort of that valley that goes up between right behind the tennis courts, and then there's that other lobe that starts going up as well over from the tennis courts around back to the high school. So we can definitely begin looking at what happens up above and look at some of the grades. We currently only have the survey from the existing campus here in this area, but if the county has surveys of the full 160 acres, we can certainly look at what the grades are and if there is potential further north of the campus site or its campus location it's all on the same site. But to that point, any kind of development on these grades would not be recommended. They would be extremely cost prohibitive due to the amount of cut and fill and the amount of money the county would be putting just in leveling a site to be prepared for a facility, any facility, really. Did that make sense?
Yeah, I want to make sure that area is looked at for whatever purpose. I mean, it's there, it's useful for something other than, I mean, farmland's useful, that's good. Is it good for buildings? Is it good for residential? Is it good for solar? I don't know, but I'd like that looked at as a potential source.
Sure. Yes, we can definitely we'll take a look at what the survey and the grades are further north of here and see if there is any potential with that.
Thank you.
Other question, Mr. Manning.
I'd like to go back to the demolition. You seem to be able to do anything on your apps. I got one favor to ask you. One of the major costs of demolition, buildings, concrete, brick like that, is getting rid of dumpster services. Is there any way you could come up with an estimate of tonnage on each of them buildings?
We can certainly ask our construction manager partner on that. I do not have that information for you tonight, though.
If you could come up with each building and each tonnage of each one, that would be awesome.
And of course, it'd be an estimate. Yeah. Other questions for Kyle? We've been grilling you pretty good here, Kyle. All right. So again, this has given us a lot of different information to consider in a lot of different directions. So we thank you for complying with our requests, and we'll talk before the board meeting happens as to what we were looking for specifically for that. But I think probably some of the same things you shared with us tonight is stuff the whole board needs to hear.
Okay, and to go back to that agenda piece.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like you have the information you need from our team for that board meeting?
I think we do. For as much as we can do right now, I would say yes.
Okay.
We're not at
Fantastic.
the master plan step yet, but we're closer than we were 2 months ago, and we need to keep moving in that direction. So.
Understood. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Second report on our agenda, item B, is UW redevelopment grant.
So not a ton to report on this. Obviously, applying for the grant would mean that we would know what we're applying for the grant, right? So as you all know, there was a bit of alarm with the first grant information that was released, as Candace reported, I think, to you all at this committee prior to her departure, but that language has since been modified to be less prohibitive and is now at a spot where we could apply for that grant. So Josh and I met with Ela from WEDC on February 3rd, just to really make some introductions. We had not really met formally, but had a nice meeting and did go over just some of the basics of that the UW redevelopment grant. So I was able to get access into the application. So that was one of the first things we checked off. But nonetheless, this is the $2 million grant that you all have heard about before. I think everyone in this committee is aware of that, right? So in essence, to apply for those funds are there. They're kind of just holding there for us, right? In order to get those funds, we would need to submit our plan. Our project plan is to, hey, what are you going to use those funds for? So really, in terms of applying for that grant, those funds are there, right? We just have to have a scope of why we're applying and what we're going to do. So at that point, there's things like one of the questions that I ask is, are there specific things? And really, the grant will cover lots of things. I can't say whether for sure it will cover this, that, and the other thing, but I believe with anything we're going to do out there, there is a very good chance that that grant's probably not going to be turned down. It's just going to be on us that we need to provide them with, here's a plan, here's what we're gonna do with the money, here's why, estimated cost. Really, at the end of the day, all those things that you would need to submit to, a grant if you were applying for it. So I don't think there's nothing really crazy about this or anything that is that difficult, other than we just need to say, for the $2 million, here's what we're going to do. So I think that's as far as we can take this at this point. There is a deadline to kind of keep in mind. So WEDC is basically holding those funds for us, right? The grant period is going to start July 1. The thing that's of note, and this is why I say this, because we're talking about deadlines and moving forward, there is a potential that we would have to reauthorize for that grant if we go beyond the June 30th, 2026 deadline. So I say deadline, meaning, I don't know. I said, well, okay, if we're into June of 2026 and we don't have this, grant applied for and we don't really know what we're doing, what happens then? There may be a little more work that we'll have to do on our end. What that is, I don't know, and I don't know if that's known yet. So just know that we should, I feel like we need to move forward with this, as Chair Turk just said. We need to keep making progress on this just for our own benefit as a community to move forward with the project. So I would say that we should continue to move forward. And once we have a scope of what we're going to do, that would go to the grant. I know we can call ELA with questions, and some of that grant's already started. We started to fill some of that information out, background information, those kinds of things. But we really should be making momentum on this project, not to push it through without any thought, but we should continually be moving forward with this project, as you all know, to make sure that we're utilizing the funding in the most efficient and mutually beneficial way to the county and all of us involved in this process. Community members, anyone involved. So there's nothing really else to say to that other than the grant is there, and when we're at a spot where we can apply for the grant and we have a scope of what we're going to do, then that's what we would submit. So I think how we proceed with that depends on how we proceed with the project, right? Like what are the plans? So that's kind of not the last step, but we need to know what we're going to do with funds. So yes, sir.
So is the grant, how specific is the grant? Because if we're talking regular maintenance and bills, regular utilities, monthly utility bills for the next year, along with a bridge project and some maintenance, is that the scope that they're after? Are they after this building, this will get done? We know what their specific scope is.
Yeah, it's more like, what is the plan? How do you want to spend the money? And whether that can be broken out in like one submission or 5, I don't know those details, but I believe, as Ingrid said, this would be more of a larger plan. So a development plan, or how you're going to use those funds. So like, for instance, and I hesitate to say this because the word demo is very scary. And the first part of this meeting, I didn't want it to go that way, but I just asked a simple question like, so if we wanted to use that for some of the demo costs to repurpose either the land, if you will, or the space, would that be a viable cost? And yes, so if that's a route that's considered, at least in a portion or something, then okay, well, that's a pretty easy, application to fill out if that's what we're going to do. But I think we need to think bigger picture and how that's all going to be.
How specific they were, because ongoing utility bills or something.
Sure.
Yep.
Absolutely.
It's important that could be used for that, and we still have that
Correct.
funding sitting somewhere else. So.
Right. And the bridge construction project, I know I had said to some people before that we were funding that with the grant, and we actually paid that with last of our COVID money.
Yeah.
So we aren't using the grant for that, so.
And I think, we had a very nice conversation, and Josh, if you want to chime in, feel free.Ela's very open to communication. So I would say that if we get to a point where we think we may have a project in mind, then we call her and we just kind of discuss that and say, here's kind of where we're at. What are your thoughts? Do we need more? Do we need less? Is this viable? We'll open those lines of communication. Right. And
being as though there's not a precedence for this type of a grant in the past, then that's what it would be. Like, you would be looking at this for development of that property or how to sustain it, but like qualifying utility costs, like to keep the heat and stuff on, that stuff is typically not accepted in the grant. So again, you know, you have something that you're thinking about, you want to do with that property, get her on the horn, ask that question, and she'll have to ask her superiors that question.
Sure. Thank you.
And the other thing to mention was there, and I have not heard a response back from them, but there is a possible funding for additional funds outside of that allocation for community visioning and outreach as well, because I thought that was very important. Those PR pieces are just to help, you know, whatever the end project is going to be, or even in these phases, to keep the community informed, to be transparent and all that stuff. If there was any additional funding for that, I did not get a response for that, but should there be those additional funds outside of the 2 million, I will let you all know that. But it's nice to know that there's a possibility for things like that to happen as well, because that's an important piece of this puzzle as well.
From my understanding, those additional funds would be more or less capped at about 50,000 additional, but there wouldn't be anything more than that.
Correct.
Any other questions on the redevelopment grant? Posted as we move. Item C, campus reconfiguration committee duties. This is what we alluded to earlier, that we were created as the campus reconfiguration committee and looking at uses of the campus property, the buildings, the property, whatever. We have gotten into a larger discussion about county space needs. While that does cross over with the campus situation, it's also bigger than that. We were not necessarily created for that purpose. And so as the chair, I feel like it would be appropriate for us to go back to the full board and say, do you want us to continue down this road? We're already a group together. We're having some of these conversations because they do intersect with the campus property. Does it make sense for us to take on that bigger challenge? Not really worried about renaming the committee or whatever, but just do they want us to go that far? Do you guys think that makes sense?
Is that a resolution issue that's got to come to them for the, I mean, how is that direction given clearly?
The question that was posed, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
The question that was posed was, is the campus reconfiguration committee the audience for all the Richland County space needs and master planning discussions? So at this point, it's kind of hard to separate those because, as we just said, with space needs, and this committee, I feel, has to figure out how we're going to utilize those buildings, so then in tandem or shortly thereafter, then pivot to, okay, well, now we know what we're going to do with that. Can we use the space or not? And then you folks could start to do the space needs stuff, because they're all kind of intertwined, right? But you have to decide what you're going to do with one before you use the other to know what you have to work with. So my thought was, for now, that this committee would kind of field those things, or at least be the receiver of these items. And once we got to a point where we were fairly confident that we knew what we were going to do with the campus properties and submitting the grant, right, then we pivot to the space needs. And if that meant that, a different ad hoc committee was formed as the CRC duties are done, or you just continue on the path that you all started and you considered all these things anyway. It was just, I think that's been one of the questions with the folks from Venture is, so do we bring this all to CRC or should it be separate? And my thought is it should all come here for now because you're all intertwined, and then you separate later, or the committee just carries on as a rebranded committee. Because we have talked about that at the last meeting too, like, what does this committee do? Like, what do we want to do? And it's incredibly difficult to separate those things now because all these things are together. So I think it was just clarification, and that's why this is a report and not necessarily an action item, but just an understanding for you guys that these duties will likely touch space needs and master planning to a certain degree until the campus stuff is figured out, and then you all can figure out how you want to function as a committee. But just so there's a central conduit for all this to go through, so decisions can be made holistically, globally, because they're all intertwined. Fair?
Fair. And if the full board does want us to continue down that road and keep on doing stuff, then we could get an explicit statement from them so that, no, it's not that this committee overstepped its bounds. It's that, okay, yeah, you were created for this purpose. Now we see that the stuff is bigger, so continue on. So
I guess that's what I'm after, is that clear direction. Doesn't end up in some other committee and some other.
We wanted to discuss it here with the idea that we'll bring it up to the full board. If the full board wants to do a formal resolution, we can pass that at our next meeting. We're not going to be that far down that path yet in a month or so.
Yeah, and I think it's those clarification of duties, right? So even as outside calls are coming to all of you and coming to my phone, then I can say, okay, nope, that is still a CRC committee. Those master planning issues, space needs analysis, even for employees, right? Nope, that's discussed at this committee, just so we all know what the sandbox is to plan for now, and then the sandbox can grow or collapse when we get to that pivotal point, right? just so we all know.
And I agree, yeah, just the clarity of it.
Yep, that's it. So I think we give that as a report at the county board meeting, Chair Turk can see here's committee scope, and that's the best we have for now.
Any other comments on that? Then we'll move on to item 8, discussion and possible action priorities for future use of the campus buildings and or property. Right. Those are the kinds of questions we're starting. What do you guys want to do with that? So as a committee, what are we thinking we want to do with it? People have a number of different suggestions for out there. People look at, well, it was created for an educational purpose. They would like to see it continuing for an educational purpose. If that's something we felt was a priority, okay, what might that look like? We have space needs as a county. Would we want to say, well, one of our first priorities will be looking at it to see if any of the buildings out there can help meet our space needs as a county? People have brought up the need for housing in the community. Would we want to say, well, one of our top priorities is to see if this could realistically be used for a housing type development? Commercial development. Are there any other number of uses potentially for the property and buildings? So just wanted to have some discussion as a committee. Do we have an opinion on what we think the top priority or priorities should be as we look at reuses? Because people are starting to come forward with ideas, so we can give guidance into what our priorities are that will help folks who have ideas.
Question.
Yes.
So I know in the conversation you guys were having about the space needs assessment for the jail and for the courthouse, which are obviously, that's a huge space needs. We know that the jail has to be, I mean, we've got to address that issue. That's been on our to-do list for a very long time. Can't go much longer. Do we as a county have any other property that would suffice for those, for that type of building requirements other than what that is?
There could be possibilities as far as any property under our direct control. We own some other land out by Pine Valley.
Yeah, there's some other spots, there's
Yeah.
some other properties.
And could there be other properties that aren't under our direct control now that we could look at? Potentially, yes.
There's 30-some acres out there.
One thing that's a common point of discussion, if you look at where counties have built new jail, courthouse, law enforcement center facilities around the state, they're typically built on the peripheries of the community because that's where the land is. There isn't a lot of land, in the middle of a community to generally build something like that. So when Kyle was showing us the conception of being able to do it with, closely within the footprint of the block we're in now, that would be fairly unique.
What about, would the campus area be considered a periphery? Okay, I understand that the city has its stance right now, but we're just not discussing that at the moment. Because
Absent the city.
We're knocking all those buildings down and putting our courthouse and our jail on there. But the fact of the matter is, we've gone over and over the viability of those buildings out there. And most of them are extremely low viability without a large amount of cost. Now, we could also talk about housing. I'm not disagreeing with necessarily the housing aspect, but we know we need a jail and we know we need a courthouse.
I think it would be fair to say.
We should be exploring that more.
I think it would be fair to say, absent the city's objection, would we be looking at the largest piece of available real estate we have for a possible site? Probably.
I know that you're saying it's a non-conversation at the city level, but I think we have to find a way to make this a conversation. Huh?
Sometimes you have to have a conversation. Someone has to say no.
Well, and people have pointed out that, right now the jail is in the middle of downtown, right across the street from a senior housing facility. So
Several schools that are farmer schools. So
I think that's a great point. I think this is exactly what needs to happen in these things is that's a priority. Okay, great. So we've identified that a county service is jail or judiciary center, whatever you want to call it. Fair point. So I think that's
The other issue we have out there, we had zoning here one day showing all these maps, and it is flood zone right up to the front door of the county.
yeah, that's a big part out there.
So you're saying we wouldn't be able to rebuild?
Well, we'd have to look at from where the buildings start now backward to stay out of the floodplain. The parking lots are pretty much in the floodplain. It goes almost right up to the door of the student center and close to the door of the gym, I believe.
It goes quite a bit.
Other committee members have input first. I'll get to you.
So when you say future, are we looking the next year for some of these smaller projects, or are we really looking at what is our long-term perspective?
I think it's a long, what is our vision? What do we want to see happen there?
So I would like to see out there, I think a judicial center out there is a good step. I think the space is there for it, and I think it brings attention and business to that side of Richland Center. Things are growing one way, and I think doing some construction, building out there starts developing out that way, and I think that's a good thing. I think there's potential for housing out there also. Along with that, that's why I asked the question about the hillside. I'm very curious what grading would need to be done, what could be done out there, if it's viable for housing. I'm not sure. I mean, that's why I wanted that question there.
I thought they'd already proposed it as a housing.
That was.
Oh,
Yeah, like,
top
yes,
of it.
correct. Yeah, and I think various people that idea has been floated around too in a couple different ways. But
Okay, no, that's fine. It's a discussion. We need to look at some of the pros and cons. That's what we're here for.
I've been digging basements in a lot worse areas.
I would not doubt that.
One other element to put out there, the city has repeatedly suggested we could build our justice complex in the North Industrial Park, where there is already infrastructure in place and land available.
Okay.
But is that their land?
That's the city's land, yeah.
So then we would be purchasing on top of
The
the,
city's willing to work on this.
One thing I would like to look at.
yeah, there we go.
Like, look into that, like,
So buildings that need
It's
demolition.
like 1 mile between his street and our property.
Piece of it.
So.
Yeah, and
I thought about if we could purchase something like that, so, I mean, the majority of the buildable land is 1 foot top.
And the city has looked at development opportunities. Okay, so what could it look like out there if you brought the road down from Rainbow Drive to there, or over from Hive Drive to gain access to that whole back area?
I think you'd have to come from both areas.
Quite possibly. And if we're looking at that as we're contemplating our property, well, we're only fixing one bridge, does that mean we have to do the second one too? They should have good access,
I
or,
could not imagine you would ever vote for 2 bridges.
so. Those, again, things. Other thoughts on the priority from committee members?
And I guess the other thing is that I've seen that with some of the residential stuff in Madison, where you've got some of the small retail along with the residential above it. I think there's a market out there for that. I really do.
Talked to an individual today that had some very strong ideas about just that purpose.
Yeah, I'm watching a trend, and I'm not a big trend of some of the western states that are on the coast, so I won't mention any of them in particular. California, I said, yeah, thank you, California. But they're doing storage units with apartments above. And the things that they're doing with the combination of housing and retail and housing and different functions all in one, there's a lot of space out there that could cover a lot of those needs.
Yep. And, there will likely be future growth that direction of the community. Panorama Estates is going to be building 2 more buildings out where they have their one now. They should be breaking ground yet this year. So this spring, apparently, according to the hope, but, so there will be more residential there. Will there then be other development that happens out that direction? I would say it's probably pretty likely. Sooner or later, they want to put up another quick trip, right?
Cases.
I think those are great things to consider, right? Because if you want this, then you may have to make a decision to, if you want this, you have to do that or whatever. So these are good decisions to have because, yeah, all this kind of fits all together. So just we got to think about that as well too. Right? Like it's.
And then, the land out there has several things. Does it have to all be the same? Or if you do different things, well, those different things do need to be in harmony, but they don't have to all be exactly the same.
Correct.
And retail space doesn't mean it's just for sale. That could be classroom space, that could be meetings, that could be offices, that could, it's just the potential of that
So
there.
would we be selling that property then to somebody who wants to develop it, or how?
I think parts of it could be. Yeah, I think parts of it, the county says this is what we need for our needs, and then expand that out X% for future growth.
So then would we leave the existing buildings there as part of that, or would you say
Oh,
it should be done
That
with,
could be part of the discussion.
right?
I think that's part of the
Somebody
discussion.
Like bringing it up, like it, yeah. think about-
And the other thing I think we need to consider is a time factor. We can't sit and hold on to this property for a long period of time because it is draining funds that we could be using for other things.
What actually is that zone for? Now, what zoning is that?
I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, we'd have to look, check with the city and see.
Imagine-
It is all within the city, so.
So if we wanted to do what I think is a good idea, would we have to change zone?
Most likely you'd have to, again, based on conversations, most likely there'd be a lot more support for that change.
Well, and to the reuse, if you're thinking about the buildings, you know, as Kyle alluded to, like perhaps one building is paired better, like if the gym is paired better with another institution entity, right, that is close to it, then it's easier to kind of draw those lines in the property and then say, okay, from this line over, you know, you can do something with that, because you want to be careful about saying, we're going to use this building for that and that building for that and that for that, and you have a patchwork of buildings which may or may not be related to one another for any purpose, but then, you know, splitting it up too much too presents also another array of things too to think about. I mean, amongst many.
And there are other factors. I know there's a large water main
Right.
that goes around the back of the property to feed the high school, you know, so you can't dig right there, but you have to work around that stuff as you would any place you build.
Right. So I guess one of the steps I see is, let's identify through this plan what our wants and needs are there, and then what we don't, the rest of it, we need to look at parking it, moving it, doing something with it.
I've heard some people express trying to find the most beneficial public purpose for it, whether that's in the hands of a private developer or whoever is going to make the best difference for. And if it's in the hands of a private developer, well, that helps our tax base too.
Right. I mean, you can put conditions on that with a private developer. There's got to be this type of housing, there's got to be this type of meeting space, or this type of, that could be a requirement
That's possible.
of those contracts.
The other thing we gotta look at is our mandated service. What are we mandated to provide to the people in this county?
And yes, you're right. And just to get back to that topic, 911 is not a mandated service. It's not required. Should we have it? Yeah, we should. So mandated service, I agree, but there's also things that are not strictly by state statute mandated that we still need and have to do. So that's bigger than just the word mandated service.
We talked about that before.
Yeah, like we've explored mandated / essential services, like, you know, you can make lots of things that are essential services that are not mandated. So you have a very good point, Bob. I mean, obviously we need to think about that stuff because I envision, you know, our role as a local government is to make sure that we're providing the necessary infrastructure for the community to function and be safe, which is lots of things like, you know, various other services too that we don't need to talk about now, but yeah, fair point. But I think, Steve, that's also a very, very fair point. That's, you know, we have an obligation to do what we're supposed to do with tax levy and all those
And be
things too.
responsible with it.
And that's correct. We're stewards of that money for the community. So we have to make sure that we're upholding what we are supposed to do as a local government, at the same time, giving the best we can for all of us here, right? That's tricky, but fair points from both of you.
Other committee thoughts? Al, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that, you know, if you're talking about building a $50 million justice center, your land cost you have to go out and buy is gonna be a pretty small piece of that. Right?
Correct.
You know, I mean, so I don't know that I would get too hung up over, you know, paying $2,000 or $3,000 an acre or whatever.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's
Well,
a small
Right,
piece.
right.
That's what it is now, and then when somebody finds out you're interested in it, it's 25,000.
Then there's that.
That's
Right.
Do the buying for you.
Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, I've noticed a sweet spot in this whole conversation after seeing the architect talk, is that one of the big problems with this complex is that the prisoners have to get to court without going through the public. So what if this was no longer a public facility? The court was entered from the other street, all this was all security, and all these offices that really need to be more on one floor and one-stop service when people come in or in Melville Hall. You solve the long-term jail issue. I talk about really making it right. All the security issue, we had, 10 years ago, we studied this in the elevator and the stairs. And they were putting corridors around there, like catwalks or whatever. I mean, every different way you could do it. But what if people just couldn't come in? You have complete control. Then you do a thorough remodeling. I'm just saying, dollar-wise, this could be a sweet spot that until they identified that open space, you guys decided that should be open space offices. That's the one-stop shop we needed all along for these other departments.
Mr. Lowe, go ahead.
Couple of quick points. I had 3 points, but you hit on one of them. I don't think it's a big issue to have courts separate from jail. I know a number of counties, especially Richland County, they don't have a problem. Courthouse is downtown, jail's out on the periphery. Big deal. The other thing is I really question the need for 80,000 square feet for a new prison. It seems really big. I go up to Vernon County a lot with therapy dog work. And I don't think they're near that size, and they're a bigger county.
Probably not. And theirs was built before the latest standards. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just a calculation based on the standards. So,
Yeah, based on 100 bed.
all right. Other thoughts on our priorities?
Good list.
So let me restate what I've heard here that, okay, we do want to look at the county's needs. That's probably our first priority. And after that, we're open to ideas on what other purposes that will benefit the public, whether that's a housing facility, just housing, retail, a private developer wants to acquire that property and do something with it. Not have it sit in our hands for a long period of time. Am I summarizing pretty well what we've talked about? Okay. All right, very good. That'll be good information for us to document it on our conversation. It's on the recording if anyone wants to go back and listen to it. So we know what to be telling you. Thank you.
It helps venture kind of form ideas too when they're thinking about planning. So.
All right. Item 9, discussion and possible action update on inventory of campus items and associated costs. We're out there today. Yes, Steve.
Most of you know Wilkinson's auction yesterday. I had Shane come up, walk through it with Dave and I and Randy, just to get an idea. I just went back and looked at, we had that proposal before for $154,000. To have somebody come and do the inventory and all that. And I didn't put him on the spot or anything. I said, you need to go back and talk to your dad. Usually they just take a percentage. It took us, well, yeah, he got there a little bit before 4. It was about 20 to 5. 20 under done. Walking through it. I mean, we didn't go through a real fine-tooth comb, but it takes a while. His suggestion would be to start with our lower, one of the 2 buildings, either that we have mothballed for the winter. Take out what we, as a county, would want, think we want, and then they would send their people in to categorize. They would put it in lots, don't move the stuff, and online sale auction. They do that a lot anymore, so it's an idea, but, and then just do one building at a time. That'd give us time to get our stuff out of one of the buildings, either the library or the classroom building, and then just keep moving until we get through all the stuff. And like they do at any auction, leave your best stuff till last. If you have.
Yes.
So.
Well, and there may be other items we want to look at. There are thousands and thousands of books in the library. Is that something we want to auction off by the ton? Or do we want to offer it up to our local library, which the county heavily funds, and say, hey, take all these books and do something with them if you can? Or how do we want to handle that? You know, and there are other things out there. There are a lot of Windows 7 computers out there. Computers at all, how valuable is that? Not. So they would need to be recycled. And that's, you know, I don't know if they have any value to somebody that would bid on them, or if that's something we just need to pursue for recycling. And stacks and stacks, chairs and tables in various states of usability. Some are quite good, some are quite not. So there will likely be a lot of discard that has to happen. We will see what we can do about finding some funding for that or some assistance with it, because Tony Kurtz is going to come up Friday as his plan. He wants to walk through and see what all stuff is out there that we're left to deal with. So.
Also, Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes.
there's the other items from theater items, there's lots of other unity items related closely to community members that we need to really also think about in terms of how that should be distributed as well, because those calls come on a weekly basis. So
Yes, they definitely do. So our goal all along has been to be the most fair we can, to give everybody an equal shot as best we can. We have utilized some items for the county so far, and we'll likely have more that we can do. Our MIS system is going to look at some computers out there and see if any of them are usable for county purposes. I think they've salvaged one so far, right?
Yeah. One or
very
two. The rain has been taking, interchanging old office furniture here, bringing it back and starting to stockpile these pretty poor shape stuff.
So we will, I think as Shane outlined, probably the best approach. Okay, we designate a building, we go in first. What can we use out of here? And we'll take that. And then if there was something special in there that, for in the science building, for example, there's a lot of taxidermy. A lot of that we'll have to check with the DNR to see what we need to do with, because it's not legal to be sold. So we'll have to figure out how best to handle that stuff. But once we've just considered those special items or items that actually belong to other entities, then the rest of it gets photographed by the auctioneer, listed online. Online auction happens. There are a couple of days of like an open house to.
The preview days, you go in and preview, and then there's after the auction, you would have so many days, a couple days, a while to pick up, so that we're not wasting people's time trying to have sitting out there waiting for people to show up. They'd have probably a weekend or something.
So that's where things kind of stand right now. Anybody have questions on that?
We just thought that it worked out for Shane. He was coming to get a big auction next week at Hillsborough, so he came by and stopped in. I thought, well, we're waiting to ask you guys if that's okay to do. Now we're another month behind. So I'll just call him and see if he wants to look at it. He might just say no, but yeah, definitely going to cost us $150,000. But I think
They work on a percentage then.
they have a percentage. They will advertise. They take care of everything.
Guessing the percentage would be fairly significant because it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
But we're not paying a bill.
Right.
That's right.
Yes. Any other committee questions? Mr. Lowe, do you have a question?
Commission to examine your pianos.
We don't have that on our agenda to determine that tonight, so we got your comment from before.
We can put it on the next meeting's agenda.
Put on the next meeting agenda.
So, item 10, discussion and possible action, set next meeting date. It was 2 months since our last meeting. I don't think we want to wait that long again. I would suggest 2 or 3 weeks, maybe. Sometime after the board meets.
Right, so we have our board meeting next week, and then the week after, the first few days are legislative conference, so that puts you through, 27th would be February, 27th would be 3 weeks from tomorrow, 2 weeks from tomorrow, sorry.
February 27th?
2 weeks from tomorrow.
I
Thursday.
Southwest Tech.
Okay. So,
What do you have on the 24th?
We're 24th, we're busy with
Exactly.
executive budgets.
so if we look at the next week, that's like March 3rd, 4th, 5th.
First week tomorrow.
Well, we could do what is this, today, Wednesday?
Yes.
Good work, works better for you.
Calendar. So
Maybe Wednesday nights is better. No, because we took the public works and moved it to the 13th, so the 6th would be open.
what day of the week is?
That's Thursday, unless you want to do the 5th, Wednesday.
Yeah, community health services.
Yeah, Thursday already. I don't know. Either one is fine.
They shoot for Wednesday.
Wednesday the 5th. We want to do 5 or 6 or what time?
It's fine.
5 p.m.
Either way.
All right, 5 p.m. on Wednesday, March 5th for our next meeting.
Just to have an idea, like, would it be similar? I mean, do you think it will take 2 hours again, or will it be less now?
I would
that we
hope
have-
not. We've started some of the big conversations now. And so it's time to think a little bit about what we've talked about tonight, and come back and start acting on some of that stuff probably.
Are we also anticipating we're gonna have further nailed down what our duties are after the county board meeting? Is that on the agenda? for the county board meeting?
It'll be part of our report to the county.
Yeah, I don't know how much more you need to nail down other than just acknowledging that discussions on space needs and master plan will likely, be incorporated into these discussions, and should a decision for those 2 items need to be made outside of CRC, we would just take it to the board for board action, but it's just the acknowledgement that for now, you're gonna kind of handle 3 things by virtue of the task, and then we'll decide the fate of the committee later, but
If the board decides they want to officially
if they want another.
ordain us and pass a resolution, then that would happen the following month.
Just again to add that, so we have direction.
I would say no. It takes 2 hours.
So,
I would second that motion.
Because I won't take.
all right, did we have any correspondence? Other
Nothing
than what we
to
discussed in public comment, okay. So any other future agenda items based on what we've discussed?
I like that the items at the campus review, I don't want to limit it to just pianos. I want to limit it, if there's some questions, if we have some experts that can look at some of these things, I would like to have that, have the opportunity.
And there might be some specialized equipment there that
Right,
insight
yeah.
could be valuable for.
Right.
There are a lot of microscopes, for example.
There's some telescopes out there,
Yes, there are.
beautiful telescopes out there.
And Mr. Federley did, he sent us an email saying he would be willing to help sort out those things of value as his connection with the campus. So that was recorded. I think you knew that too, right?
Maybe make the agenda item something like more broad, so they can.
Further discussion on a plan to assess some of those items.
Yeah, it's good, something.
Yeah, and that's, that would help direct me. So if people call, I can say a plan is in place for items to be viewed and a process or something will be determined somehow, because
Right.
Those first 2 buildings are pretty basic. You got the library.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
No, but the other ones, especially the pianos,
Yes.
Mr. Lowe is.
Theater and science building are those are the 2 challenges.
Yes.
Yeah.
We can, and again, we're looking to assess the viability and value of the contents, so we know what to do with it.
Exactly.
We're not saying come in and you guys can have it. We're saying give us information so we know what we're dealing with and how best to deal with it.
These are local experts.
Yep. All right, any other agenda items? All right, if not, item 13, looking for a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Manning. Second by Supervisor Glassbrenner. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
We already, you want to see what the floodplain is quick?
They should.
I know that whole soccer.
Yeah. It's all the light, whatever it's called.
So that, if we want her to come back to get more information.
Oh.
So honestly.
So don't think I was there.
Want the work plan.
You can make a lot more.